Okay, hello everybody. We're broadcasting live from Tzfat, Israel. Just going to call our group here and let us begin. So we're teaching the Torah, the Baal Shem Tov, and it's very, very interesting Torah. And it is about basically from bad to good. It's about the negative to the positive. So let us take a look. And okay, welcome everybody. So we sort of did this teaching yesterday, but it's a kind of there are different sources here, so it could be kind of a very similar teaching, but a little bit different words. So each teaching brings out something unique. Everyone is familiar with the Torah teaching that the Baal Shem Tov taught on the pasuk, "Come to the ark." The Baal Shem Tov says that a soul comes into this world. The person becomes preoccupied with making a living through labor. He believed that it's better to be a skilled laborer than a business person. This way, a person can become consumed. The solution is come to the ark, to attach oneself to the words of prayer, the words of Torah they learn, and the merit of the connection to these holy letters of prayer and Torah. The Baal Shem Tov predicts that you will be helped in all that you need. So this is a very, very important concept. We said it yesterday, but we'll say it again today. The Baal Shem Tov speaks often about the idea that within the very words themselves, like words are a pipe. Inside the pipe is, let's say, the water, but it could be something else. It could be pumping, gas. So the pipe itself is just a container. Inside that container can be anything. And so within the letters, Hashem puts himself. So when we connect to God within the letters of Torah and prayer, then we connect deeply to Hashem, and then once we're connected to Hashem, we actually are able to get the help, because as the Rebbe says, once you have the essence of Hashem, you have blessings. Anytime we're operating on a lower dimension, the Chovos HaLevavos says you get help from wherever you think help is coming from. So if you think it's your boss, so one day your boss doesn't need you, and then you're fired. If you think it's your father, your father also has his temperament. The only one that's beyond any limitations at all times, at all moments, is there 100% is Hashem. So we have to connect. That's what it says in Ashrei, Karev Hashem l'chol karev. Hashem is close to all who call him. L'chol asher yikre'u v'emes, whoever calls him in truth. Ein emes el Torah, there's no truth but Torah. So the Torah is the truth of Hashem, and within the Torah is Hashem. So when you connect to Hashem within the Torah, you then are able to manifest godliness on a very, 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 very real way. But it depends on the intention. When you're learning, you have to have in mind the intention is that Hashem is the one that you are connecting to. Okay, let us continue. God created, just interesting, I realized that today is September 11th. So even though it's a it's the English date, but we do want to recognize that the evil of Islam is not only there against the Jewish people, it's against all people. I put out a video today, I don't know if it managed to get up or not, but effectively people don't understand what Islam is. Islam, apart from the good parts, which come, the Jewish parts, as we said the other day, there are Jewish parts in all different faiths and philosophies. Those are the good parts. But it has a philosophy of literally using military force or any force necessary to subjugate. In fact, Islam means to subjugate all people to its will. So it has no place in a democratic world. It has no place in a society that believes that people have the freedom to make choices. It doesn't believe in choices. It believes we are right, and we have the right to kill anybody to install our version of reality, similar to Nazism, similar to communism. And it's critical to vote for Trump for the simple reason, because people that don't get that are going to kind of allow Islam to spread. Iran is trying to make nuclear bombs, which literally I was always wondering, why is Iran into, like, what do they need it? They don't need it. They have enough oil. But finally I asked somebody from Iran, he said that they believe, the Shiites believe, that when the world will be up to horses' knee and blood, the Messiah will come. So it's a very serious situation we're dealing with. There's no, we can't say that without Hashem's help, we're basically, we have no help. You know, Republicans didn't, when Trump was in office, he didn't attack Iran. You know, Netanyahu, for all his rhetoric, has not done anything of that sort either. You know, the most they did was some sanctions, but the bottom line is they are marching towards this. And so hopefully it's our prayers and sacrifices that many people are making on many ways that will actually be the coming of the Mashiach. My wife said today this war is going to end with Mashiach. Let's hope that it is now. Okay, we're going to continue. God created the world through din, judgment, which is tzimtzum, concealment. Right, so we know that there are basically three pillars, how everything functions, one of three. Either it's coming through chesed, which is kind of this unconditional love, or it's coming through gvura, or it's called din. And gvura is already a restriction of the flow. So, for example, a nipple, there's a flow, but there's a restriction of the flow, which is actually a benefit, because that way the baby can drink. Or, for example, if you turn on your faucet and, I don't know, an ocean came out, it would drown you. But if you turn on your faucet, just the right amount, you get the right amount into your cup. So our world is created with these two forces, the force of giving and the force of restraining. These are the two forces that operate at all times, chesed and gvura. And of course, there's the intermediary force when you have the giving and the restraining, and that mix creates tiferes, creates a balance. And then there's a certain amount that comes, amount that is good. That's what's called rachmanus. It is rachamim. It is compassionate. It is just the right amount to help the individual. Again, so the force of love would just be all giving. It would consume the other. Some people, they're very loving, but they're very much about their own energy going out. They're not really thinking so much about the people they're giving to. Then there's the force of concealment, restriction, which if you're wise, you're not thinking so much about how this makes me feel, but more about how am I making, or not even how am I making the other person feel, but what's in the interest of the other person. And so that is connected to Hashem, that's connected to the mind. The mind is connected, then the mind and the heart connect, and then the giving and the restraining become balanced. Sometimes restraining can be a state of anxiety where a person just goes basically, I like to say, chesed is yes to everything. Gvura, or fear, is no to everything. But tiferes is a balance, which should be based, the center goes to the mind, it goes up to God, and comes down to the heart, where you balance yourself and you decide when to give and when not to give, etc., etc. The principle of tzimtzum is a contraction of his infinite light, so that something finite can both be created as well as appreciated. So again, what is the principle of tzimtzum? It is a contraction of the infinite light of God. If God just gave, none of us would exist. As I had this realization this morning, that God's darkness is also light. What we don't see is also his kindness. If you think about his kindness as his light, what you don't get is also his light, because there has to be a limitation, which is of benefit to all of humanity and all of society. A parent that just gives his children, let's say you give your little child a credit card, is basically a stupid parent, because the child needs to learn principles of growth, etc., etc. The principle of tzimtzum is a contraction of his infinite light, so something finite can both be created as well as appreciated. In every universe, that tzimtzum took place to cause this. And the beings in that universe, such as souls, etc., each according to their intelligence, appreciate God. So there is a tzimtzum, and the tzimtzum creates a limitation, and the limitation creates that the things in that world can have intelligence and independence, and they can now seek out God, and they can understand. In other words, you have to be able to, in order to observe something, there has to be a you. has to be an observation or the thing that you're thinking about. There also has to be time. There has to be the time to think about it. And then as time progresses, and because God is infinite, you could always discover it in a deeper way. So things happen in this kind of a cycle. When we have pain or suffering, God forbid, this comes from the body. In essence, the body is connected to the soul, the life force. When we realize that everything is created by the singular God, and we love God notwithstanding, knowing that everything that happens to us is from Him, we connect the din to the level of the body and symptom. We connect the din to the soul, which is happiness and life force. In other words, so we all have these two elements in us. We have the soul element, which kind of is God in His own knowing. And we have the body element, which is kind of restriction and limitation. And so what we do is we're connecting the soul and the body together. And in this connection, we actually are able to bring joy into our lives. This transforms, the negative turns into God's compassion. So what did we say before? That negativity is only negativity when it's in the state of negativity. But if you connect love with harshness, right? A parent that, let's say, is being tough on their child is not a bad parent. They're a good parent. They love their child. They're doing it because they love their child. So when you connect the love and the harshness together, you actually turn into compassion. And you evoke God's blessings because that's where the unlimitedness of God is actually in the state of compassion. Does anybody have any questions on this?
Yeah, I have a question. I was just actually listening in another class, something about in the parsha when it talks you can't put an ox and a donkey together. It says because one is Deborah and one is Chesed. But I was reading also what you're saying, and Tanya, this was it the last few days or somewhere, that when you, maybe yesterday even in Tanya, that when you have the Deborah and the Chesed together, you get Tiferet. So why am I getting confused when it says you can't put the donkey and them together? You can't put Deborah and Chesed together.
Interesting. Where was the class from, if I can ask?
It was Heilbrook's class, and I was just now, like right before, I was in the middle actually of listening to it while it was in your before your class started. Then I switched over to this. I was listening to a recording of it, and she has it every Wednesday, 40%. But she was just saying that it says the parsha, you know that you can't.
Sure.
But you can't work with a donkey and an ox together,
right.
Something like that.
Right.
And she went on to say that, Kabbalistically, that's, Chesed and Gevorah.
Right. I hear you.
Okay.
I don't know. I'm not sure. I think that generally speaking, the whole point is the mixture of Chesed and Gevorah, obviously, for the sake of Chesed, But that's kind of the point. Just trying to think if I can think of any other examples where we don't. The thing that came to mind is kreplach. You put the meat, which is red, which is gvura, in the white dough, which is chesed, right? That's chesed and gvura. Right. But the idea is that the main thing is chesed. That's why you're putting the chesed around the gvura. So I don't know. I'm sure she has a good source, but I don't know. I think that ultimately, generally the way we speak of things is that we want to have the side of chesed, the side of rachamim. But we also speak about too much chesed could be a problem, too much gvura could be a problem. So ultimately, I guess it does boil down to this balance. You have to have, basically the mind has to rule, and the mind has to be able to make these decisions of what is right and what is wrong. And then that is the ultimate balance of chesed and gvura, because you're using your mind to make. It's almost like convictions is the pillar, because if you have convictions, then everything you're doing is based on, like, in a way, the mind as opposed to the emotions. All right. Any other questions on the subject? Okay. The advice on how to contemplate this is in the verse, God your Lord. Right? V'ahavta es Hashem Elikecha. So Lord, Elikim, refers to din. Elikecha is similar to din. And so he says, take the negative and connect it to Havaya, which is the soul, by accepting it joyously. So he's saying that accept joyously. So many of the teachings that we're going to go through the Baal Shem Tov now is this concept of how to kind of transform the din, how to take the negative and turn it into a positive. And there are obviously many techniques here. But this technique, the latest one that we're saying is like, accept it with joy. Because often what happens is that a person gets din in their life and we become, I think it's the Ron has this really interesting, great teaching. He says, why is it that when adults have an argument, they become enemies? They don't talk to each other. But when children have an argument, 2 minutes later, they're friends and they forget the argument ever existed. If I ask you, can you remember the arguments you had as a child? I don't remember any. And now if I say to you, remember the arguments you had as adults, they're so personal and that, why did So the answer is because he says children prefer to have fun than to be right. But adults prefer to be right than to have fun. Why? Because our egos develop a little bit. So now our egos are very precious to us. So now we're upset. And then what we're doing by being upset is we're holding on to the problem. We're holding on. Really, what do anti-Semites want? They want you to hate them. It says about the Mitzrayim, I think we said it before, but a very powerful thing. It says by Yoido Isanu that they did, it's like the kind of terminology is not that they did bad to us, but they wanted us to become bad. In other words, what is the anti-Semite really looking for? He's looking that you should be an anti-Semite. You think about, God forbid, the Holocaust, the Germans did random acts of violence. Okay, I mean, not okay, there's no okay whatsoever, but I'm saying even if people decide, okay, they have to kill some, right? Even let's say a court that decides they're going to kill a criminal or something, God forbid. So they're not going to do a random act of violence, whatever. It's a procedure and they'll take and there's a judgment and whatever it is. They're not instilling fear and terror. The terrorists are trying to create terror. Why? Because a person can't live a joyous life in terror. Panicking, unfortunately, we have an epidemic of suicide, which comes from basically depression, which comes from anxiety. So anxiety, causing anxiety, which is certain unsafetyness and certain uncertainty, which is what a lot of the evil are trying to do. So we have to try to flip it around. We have to say, oh, something bad happened to me. And often the bad that happens to us is somebody did something which was random, which was rude. And maybe we become a little bit jittery. Maybe it'll happen again, or maybe our egos have been hurt. But what if we just accepted it with joy? I read the story that there was a rabbi that he, I don't know, a neighbor of his started to shame him really terribly, berate him in the street. And he was like, he told his Talmidim, oh, this is Gavaldik. Now my foot's going to get better. So what's the story? He had limping for, for 2 years. But he realized that this unnecessary shame was a tikkun. It solved his issue. I actually know the story from the lady herself. This lady, she couldn't have children. And she went to the doctor. After the doctor was like, I don't know, he got upset at her. She said, like, you can't tell me. There's a guy. He literally like squeezed her by the hand and he like pushed her out of the office. She said, thank you very much. Now I'm going to have children. And she had children because she realized that this was like a din. This din came and it took it around. And we say, there's no evil that comes from God. Now, again, we have to be smart. The Baal Shem Tov says, just because you believe in God doesn't mean you should believe in God when others are in pain. He says, just like trust is a big mitzvah, when it comes to you, it's a big avera when it comes to somebody else. Somebody else is suffering. You have to have compassion. You have to pray to God. You have to help them, etc. But when it comes to ourselves, if there's nothing that you could really do about it, the best thing that you could do about it, flip the energy around out of the negative state and into the positive. Any questions? Okay, let us continue. A parable from the Baal Shem Tov. Once there was a king who sent one of his servants dressed up as a king from a distant land to test the country under his rule in order to see if they would agree to foment a rebellion. Again, the king sent one of his servants dressed up as a king, as if he's from a distant land, in order to try to get that country that was under the king's dominion to rebel against the original king and become part of him. Some people fell for the ruse, while others who were wiser thought more about the situation. Realizing this was all a trick, they confronted the hidden servant. They said, "You're not a king. You're just a spy. You're just trying to trick us." The same holds true in life, as is well known in the example of the king who hired a harlot to test his son's morality. When a person realizes that everything is a challenge, and even within all of their pain is God, then they remove it. The shell is peeled and the sweet fruit revealed. In other words, again, when I see the situation that's coming to me and I look at the situation and I'm afraid of the situation, I don't know, let's say you have a boss and the boss is bullying you, and this becomes a whole issue in my life. So remember, you're not a subject of your boss. Yesterday, I learned a very powerful exercise that I'd like to share with you. And the exercise goes as follows. This I heard from Rabbi Noam Wolfman. So he was a guru in India, and through many amazing circumstances, he became a Chabad rabbi. And he said that all of us, we have a certain anxiety in life. And the reason we have an anxiety is because when we come into this world, and actually Rabbi Dr. Twersky, who was a great psychiatrist, who wrote over 80 books, he says, only the human being is dependent for 10, 20 years on his parents. A normal person, not a normal person, an animal, they're 2 weeks, sometimes 2 weeks or whatever, certainly within a year, they could be married with children. So they have a very lesser time of dependency. A human being that's dependent, this person has a certain fear of the lack of the attention of the person they're dependent on. We all know as children how much we desire our parents' attention. Part of the desire of that is rooted in our need for survival and our need to exist. We love ourselves, we want to exist. And so then what we do is we acquiesce. We become a person that kind of pleases, and that person that pleases becomes a person that kind of feels that the adult world as it is their boss, so to say. And then we may transfer that dependency onto someone else. The Rabbeinu Bachai actually speaks about 10 levels of trust. Everybody's on some level. He says the little baby trusts on his mother's breast, and then he goes maybe to his mother. Then maybe he sees that the mother trusts the father, he goes to the father. And then maybe you go to, yourself, if you're a cool guy and you know how to get things done, and maybe go to your boss or something. But really, it's all a mistake because you were never dependent on anyone. Imagine a world, and in this world is God. And God is the only existence. And God conceals some of his light, and inside a bubble, he creates a world, time, space, dimension. And now you have a globe, and you have first man and woman. And all this was because he loved you so much that he wanted you to exist. And now you exist. And now he wanted you to grow up with a certain sense of independence and a certain sense of your own identity. So he created you with parents and with an ego, and the ego always thinks that whatever it gets means it got it. It's the powerful one. And so now you have your little ego, but ultimately he made you. He made your ego. He gave your parents the love for you. He put together your DNA. Without him, none of this works. None of it works in a single moment. It's like a video game. Without the computer, there is no game. At this very moment, the computer that you're watching or you're looking at or whatever, it's all from the computer. The screen is nothing. The screen is just empty nothing, and the computer is making the screen every second. So too, Hashem is making everything every second. And once we understand that it is Hashem that we're dependent on, no human being can hurt you or harm you except for his wish. It is his wishes that govern everything that ever has, that everything ever was, and ever will be. And if there's a person that looks powerful, it's an illusion. Sometimes it's literally fake. God is the all-powerful one. And once we realize that, then we become at peace because we know that we're not dependent. We remove our anxiety around the loss of somebody who's not going to help me. Okay. Anybody feel good from that concept, by the way? Okay. Anyway, very powerful idea, which you could share. I put out a video with some captions today, etc., etc. So the Rebbe is teaching us, when a person realizes that everything is a challenge, and even within all their pain is God, then they remove it. We remove our challenge because we broke through the shell saying, I am the reality. And you're saying, no, you're not the reality. Hashem is the reality. Maybe we need to do a little meditation. Hopefully we could help the hostages. And maybe we can bring Mashiach through this meditation. So close your eyes for a second and take a deep breath. You breathe in Hashem. You let go of all of your pain and suffering. And take another deep breath. And just imagine that there's only light. The whole universe is just light. And imagine being God himself and desiring being able to see with your mind's eye, let's say the Jewish people, and you love them so much, and you just want them to exist and that they should have a good and meaningful life. So you decide to hide your light, and you create a dark time-space dimension, and then inside of that you put a sun and a moon, put the first people, and then they become many, many people, and then you put Avraham Avinu and Sarah, and then you have the Jewish people. And then you give them the Torah, and then you bring them into Israel, and then you send them around the world. But all in all, it's just so they can live and they can grow and everything can be good. And all the nations of the world, imagine Mashiach, they're coming to the base of Mikdash. All the Jews around the world, they all have their beautiful place in Eretz Yisrael. And there's this beautiful growth and harmony happening in the world. And that's the truth. Because the world has a past, that's its past, its present, and its future. When we understand that this is destiny, we're all in a video game. You have these games that they have a demo. Before you see the game, you see like it's playing on its own. This game is playing on its own, even according to quantum physics. Every single thing has been set. The whole world, it's all been set. The future is already the past. It's all from Hashem. And when we realize this, it's in Kabbalistic terms called Machshava Haiduma Da'ak, the first thought of Adam Kadam, of God. So when we realize this, the whole world becomes a universe in which it literally the game is what's real. And the fact that there's some enemies and this and that, they're going to be wiped out soon with Hashem's help instantaneously for the terrible evil and suffering that they cause the Jewish people and all people. Islam is a threat to Muslims, to all good people in the world. L'chaim v'levracha. Okay, I think we'll do one more teaching, and then we'll conclude for today. Baal Shem Tov explains a great secret on how to turn bitterness to sweetness, suffering to delight. One must find within the pain and suffering a source of goodness. For in the source, Gvura Din, harsh decrees, is complete loving kindness. Gvura limits the infinite expansion of God's love, just like shades on a window allow an infinite light to be seen and felt by an observer. The purpose of these limitations is so that every person can receive the limited and specific amount of energy necessary for their survival in life. Too much light energy would blow the circuit. Infinity in a finite world would cause the finite to be nullified. In addition, if all God did was give, people could become spoiled and sinful. So in this way, we keep our share in the world to come. In essence, it is all loving kindness. Through finding the source of kindness and accepting it with love, the problem returns to its source, which emanates from the positive. And then the negative turns into the positive. Then the dinim, negatives, create a kal v'chaymer analogy. If my source is complete kindness, I, who am but a fraction of my source, must certainly be complete kindness. And so it manifests. Okay, so again, very, very powerful teaching, which is find the good and the bad, because at the essence, at the source, everything is good. Din, Lamaila, the negative Lamaila, the withholding Lamaila is not negative, it's positive. It's there to give us light and life. Like we said in the beginning, it just has to limit itself, like the breast milk has to be limited so the baby can suckle. So too Hashem has to limit himself so we can exist, that we can continue. And now, maybe we'll do this exercise together. Hopefully we'll have some kind of positive benefit, which is if you're still online, join me. And let's discuss positives we can see in the negatives. Right, so let us discuss positives that we can see in the negatives. Welcome, everybody. I see somebody, I don't know if that's Korean or Chinese. maybe it's Korean, but wherever you're from, welcome. And let us discuss some positives and negatives. Okay, does anybody have something they could share, finding some positive and negatives? Maisha. Okay. I guess I could just share a few. I mean, I'm just going to say something. I'm not saying this, God forbid, to justify the situation, but hopefully to rectify the situation, bring some light into the darkness. So, in this terrible dilemma that we've seen here, is that I think it was a big wake-up call, October 7th. And in fact, we're 9/11th. These things are wake-up calls. Perhaps let's deal with October 7th for a moment. It's a wake-up call to the Jewish people to be focused on what's true and not on falsehood. And hopefully, if that brings Mashiach, it will be worthwhile. And 9/11th, which was today, if we had to see something positive and the negative, I actually had a sense, very interesting, when Bush became president, that they would put a lot of pressure on Israel. I'm not going to go into the whole thing behind it, but behind, I don't want to go into it. There's a very good book called The Secret War Against the Jews. It was written by a former federal prosecutor who saw that, I think the Republican Party, but this goes back way when, was bringing in former Nazis to work on, the weapons programs, et cetera, et cetera. So there's interesting unholy alliances that have gone on. And basically, there would have been an extraordinary amount of pressure, but in a certain sense, it took the pressure off Israel. To a large extent, it took the pressure off Israel. And it also created a certain identification between normal people with the Jewish people, because normal people realize that everybody is under attack from radical Islam. And again, it might have been a bit of a wake-up call to normal people in the world of Uru Yesheni Mishinasram, wake up and be focused on what matters and what's true. And so if we had to find the silver lining, there's hope that the silver lining is that Mashiach is going to come from this. I mean, it's, again, a very difficult thing to say, but there is a teaching which is that if somebody's imprisoned by anti-Semitic government, etc., basically what's happening is that we're extracting the energy out of that nation. So the nation of the Arabic nation, I don't know if it's I'm not sure if it's gonna exist when Mashiach comes, because of this. It's like extracting the sparks out of it. Its energy system. It's like perhaps it's wasting its energy. It's like its whole thing is about power and pride. It's us versus them. And so maybe they get a little bit of their narcissistic and evil pride, but then it's all gone. They've used up their whatever they have. So with Hashem's help, they'll use up anything that they have. It says the three things God regrets on a daily basis: the Kasdim, the Arabs. There's a lot of sadism which God does not like. The Yetzer Hara, and I think the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. And so, effectively, if we have to look at kind of everything the Baal Shem Tov is saying, he's saying that there's the din, there's the negative side, but the negative side itself is only there for the positive side. It's only there to bring us to a higher reality, a higher dimension. L'chaim v'levracha.